Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believe in a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From the City of Angels in Los Angeles, and typically from the Big Apple in New York City, but my guest host, Adrian, is missing, so I can't really say that. Welcome to the Caregiver Dave Show at caregiverdave.com. Also coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio podcast networks on 26 global audio video platforms, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Vimeo, Stitcher Radio. Oh, should I go on? No, I won't. A lot more than that. In fact, we're proud to be voted #1 caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM, and #2 on FeedSpot out of the top 60, and #2 on caringvillage.com. I had to think there for a minute. And we have an especially exciting show planned for you today. Toxic or not, your mother will ultimately need a caregiver. Yeah. So if she tells you that you are the only one she wants, and for some reason she becomes terminally ill and you have to be the guy, how's that going to work out? How much will you have actually healed to say yes to her? Well, Dr. Guy Arcuri is currently promoting his new book, Toxic Mothers, A Son's Guide to Healing and Moving On, Finding Virtue, Integrity, and Love, One Rule at a Time. Before we get started, I want to take this moment and thank my last week's guest, Dr. Mark Sims, is the hearing loss physician. He helps patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so that they can connect better with their family and friends and remain independent. And just a reminder, you can watch or listen to that interview and all our interviews on our membership website, caregiverdave.com, or any of the other 26 global networks that I mentioned earlier. Okay, enough of that, Guy. Welcome to the Caregiver Dave Show. We're so excited to have you on.
Thanks so much.
And I always like to ask my guests, just who is Dr. Guy Arcuri, and why was he placed on this earth?
Why was I placed? It took a long time to figure that out, and I still haven't figured it out. But for the most part, I have been born to teach. I think at any time I learn something new, with my next sort of thought or ambition is to teach whatever it is I'm learning. And so it was really obvious to turn this book, to turn my life into this book, just because it was pretty traumatic what transpired throughout the whole experience.
I've heard a million stories about mothers.
I'm sure.
And usually it's mothers and daughters, but typically, because the mother usually wants the daughter, not the son. So are you an only child?
No, I have an older sister. I had an older sister and an older brother. But
happened?
They are both deceased as well.
Oh my gosh. That's why you're the one. You're the chosen one that's left.
I am. Well, yes, it was. So really, in a course of 8 years, I lost my sister, my father, my mother, and then my brother, all in that time. Yeah, it was pretty tough time. So.
Wow. What was your relationship like? Because typically, you hear the saying, daddy's little girl and mama's, what is it?
Mama's boy.
Yeah, mama's boy. Yes.
Yeah.
So were you a mama's boy?
Not per se, but I mean, if you talk about toxic mothers, she was certainly looking for an emotional surrogate, so yeah.
Is she still around, by the way?
No, sir. She passed as well. And then my brother did 30 days later. So,
you're all alone. You're an orphan.
I am an orphan in the truest sense. Yes.
Are you married?
So I am. I have 2 children and my wife of almost 39 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm 47, 48 years. So it's not easy, is it?
No, but congratulations. That's
well,
awesome.
At least you have somebody and you're not totally all alone. So let's talk about your mother's relationship first. How did it start? Where did it veer off course? And was it ever fixed?
So my mother really had a traumatic childhood, and I don't think she had the tools or even the time and resources to handle that. And so she really did try her best, and she was a really loving person, and everybody on the outside loved her, but she had some real dark skeletons that, showed their.
Was she born in this country?
She was born in Ohio, and if you've ever read the book Hillbilly Elegy, that was her life. That was her life.
I have never read that. Give a quick synopsis, Cliff Note version.
Well, it's just the Appalachian, whatever you want to say, Appalachian kind of culture of, I don't know, impoverished, struggling, sort of
Beverly Hillbillies who never made it to Beverly Hills.
Yes. Yeah. So, but she had children young, and she sort of tried her best, but in the process, I think she became very toxic. And my brother and I, especially, we left at about age 18, and really, I chose to go to North Carolina and really never kind of interact up there in Pennsylvania.
So it affected you at what age?
Well, it was affecting me all the time, but I became aware of it as I realized that she was, that other people had, I don't know.
And you were how old?
Better life.
Yeah.
I was about 18, 17. So I went away to college and tried never to go back. So
you had the family had financial difficulties, I'm assuming.
We did, but my father was hardworking, and my mother didn't work until she was 34, and she didn't drive until she was 34. But she ended up doing okay financially. So that was nice.
Your father was not able to buffer that emotional problem that you guys all had?
No, he had issues of his own. I mean, he was being, he was having his own flings, and they stayed married, but it was, yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear that. And so when did you have to care for your mother? And when did you start realizing and having compassion for her problems and forgiving her and all that good stuff?
I think those are two different questions, because I got married when I was 20 years old. And so, and when I realized that I was becoming just as toxic as she was, I really got into therapy and things. And so I really realized that it was more important for me to forgive and move on and heal and to make myself better. Especially, I mean, thinking about your show and what you do, we have to be the best versions of ourselves if we're going to care for somebody. Sure. And I was, there was no way I could have entered into that situation. But so I went away, but as all of the people in my family died and had to be taken off life support and cared for, I realized I didn't know anything medically, or I didn't know about caregiving, like what you do. And so I sort of took that on because my sister was disabled, and I was actually planning on taking care of her after my parents left, but she was the first to pass away. So anyway, long story to say, I tried my hardest to make the best version of myself, but also maintain boundaries for my own family and my own protection. But my mother, maybe 4.5 years ago, contracted ocular melanoma, and then it metastasized. And she had estranged herself from my brother, who was the only other living person in my family. And so she came to me and said, would you care for me while I die? And I said, yes. I mean, unequivocally, but knowing that I had healed enough from all of her shenanigans to enter into that situation.
Yeah. You were both going through some tough times. Yeah, you lost all those people, but she lost them also, right?
Right. She sure did. Mm-hmm.
And wow, and one of your sisters was disabled. You just keep adding things to the cake, and pretty soon you got a mess.
Yes.
Wow. It's a miracle you're still alive. It's a miracle that you are as sane as you can to carry on an intelligent conversation.
Sane is a good word.
How involved was your wife in either motivating you, giving you ultimatums to fix stuff, or Just what part did she play in all this?
Well, so, I mean, she was really, I mean, we have a great marriage, and early on in our marriage, it was apparent from our own infertility that I had big issues, and she really supported me in working through those issues, knowing that they would, have long-term payoff for us.
Did you say infertility?
Yes, sir.
Did you adopt your children?
No, they were actually born through a process called embryo biopsy. Okay. That's another show.
You looked for help. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And, but anyway, after that, she was very supportive of my own family because my parents just weren't good caregivers. I worked on myself a lot, but I didn't know much about caregiving. My parents didn't do either. And they were trying to care for my sister. And my only solution as I became successful was to give them money to get a babysitter or a temporary caregiver so they could, have some relief. And that was really my only help for them.
Did that?
No, because they didn't want it, first of all, and they didn't use it the way they ought to. But my wife was she was in great support of that. And we also were saving to be able to care for my sister once my parents were gone. So
what do you do for a living?
I'm a teacher educator, and I morphed myself into an author for various and sundry reasons.
Yeah, because teachers don't have a reputation for making a lot of money. Unfortunately, it's the administrators that make all the money.
No, my wife has a great job, and we were able to be responsible.
So you seem to have a sense of humor, I think. How did that happen?
I think truly from healing, sort of what I allude to in the book, you have to embrace truth, but you don't have to, get embittered about it. For example, my mother just didn't want anyone to know she was terminally ill, and she was living in this retirement community. And I was visiting her every other week in Arizona from North Carolina. And she just insisted that no one know that she was dying, but she was wasting away and getting really small. And we went out to dinner with a bunch of her friends, and this man came over, and he had like millions of gold chains on, and he was dressed like sort of like Vinnie Barbarino. His name was Vince. Vinnie Barbarino meets, I don't know, Joe Pesci.
Mr. T.
Yes. And I said, Mom, who's that? And she said, oh, that's Vince. And she said, he's sweet on me. And I said, well, does he know you're dying? And I whispered it to her, and she said, no, he doesn't. I don't want him to know. I don't want anybody to know. And she was getting all surly about it. And so I just leaned into her ear and I said, if he's sweet on you, he better up his game because he doesn't have much time. And it totally broke the ice, and you just have to embrace the truth.
You whispered that, didn't you? Or
I did whisper that, yes.
So it broke something in her, and she changed her attitude?
Yeah, she said, and that was really the beginning of her kind of seeing my perspective, that it's hard for me to have all these people coming through her house and me pretending that I'm visiting every other week. I mean, what son does that? So
only a good son.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and they involve like hospice care workers and my mother's friends, and even my mother. And I think you need to find the humor in things right away.
Yeah, you either laugh or cry, right?
Absolutely.
How did you handle the emotional ups and downs? It's not easy being a caregiver. I don't have to tell you that now. Both of us, we were kind of drafted into it. It wasn't on our resume, weren't prepared. And then somebody comes along and says, oh, you got to put your oxygen mask on first. Got to take care of you first.
Yes.
You mean be selfish? That's a dirty word, isn't it? And so how did you start learning that you have better change your ways or you're going to die? Because 30% of caregivers die before their loved ones do.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and many more become sicker than the ones they're caring for, eventually needing a caregiver of their own. So you're one of the lucky ones.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the first thing I need to say is I wish I had heard or listened to the program Caregiver, Dave. I mean, everything was new.
Me too. I wish I would have listened to my program when I was a
Everything. It was, and I had really done the personal work of my heart and, being nice and kind to my mother. And I wanted to face the truth, but just, wills and, funeral homes, and just all of that, and insurance. And it just was a really tough thing. But I learned, I think, by doing that, I needed time. And so I actually, without my mother knowing, I hired her friends to come and babysit on a regular basis. And so when I was there for a week or even the last month completely, I hired her friends and paid them. And I went swimming, or I slept, or I went to Arby's, which is my favorite restaurant. Just things like that, to sort of have some time where, or even to talk on the phone where my mother wasn't concerned that we were talking about her. I just needed that time away. So that was really my one thing that I did to survive, was to make sure I had time for myself away.
Hey, listen, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Okay.
We are a community of caregivers that understands and supports you wherever you are in your journey. We are a place to connect with other caregivers, but more importantly, a place to get practical, actionable help. There are lots of ways for you to get support. First of all, you can download our welcome pack. This will get you started on your Thrive journey. Next, you can ask and get answers to your questions by posting them here in our private Facebook groups. You can also get live online support by attending one of our live weekly Connect webinars. You can get practical, actionable advice by listening to our weekly podcast. You can hear and read other stories about other caregivers' experiences. Plus, add your own in our weekly Share Your Story forum, posted every Tuesday in the Facebook group. You can access essential resources and download practical Thrive Solutions packs, all of which are geared to help you thrive as a caregiver. You get lifetime access to all of our resources. Again, we're here to support you and help you thrive and to enjoy your life as a caregiver. And remember, this is a place to get hope, not just cope. Hey, we're back with Dr. Guy Arcuri. Interesting. That's Italian, right?
Yes.
Interesting name. And so let's fast forward. What would you have done differently now that you're so smart now, and you know now what, if you knew then what you know now? I'll get it out, right? What would you have changed? What would you have done differently? How would that have affected you, etc.?
Well, my mother was toxic, but I think her terminal illness, it softened her, and it also kind of limited her, the way that she could respond. But she really, she and my brother had a terrible relationship. I wish I could have helped them reconcile, but both of them were just in this sort of vindication mode of, the other one needs to admit guilt and be miserable. And so, and I wouldn't be in the triangle, but I think I would have helped them reconcile because it was a terminal illness. But there's a lot of other things I would do differently. Like I would really challenge some of the things that she did. And I'm glad that I was open and honest with her, because some of them I did challenge. Like she moved in with a guy and they bought a house together.
Wow.
And it was awkward. And they weren't married, but he had children and she had children. And
wow.
So I just said, you know what? I don't want any of your money, but you need to have a trust for this house, because I have no idea what's going to happen, who's going to go first, so, and that was good because he actually got sick. No, not for a while, but once he started getting sick, then they said, oh, well, maybe we need, this. And so,
yeah. Wow.
And the other thing is I would have forced my mother to do more fun things while she had, while I could, and learned how to take her. I took her to Disney World. I took her to see her friends in Ohio and Indiana and Pennsylvania. But it was really the only thing she did when she really did have energy to do other things. But
what a nice boy you are.
Well, it is what it is. So I'm grateful. We ended up really reconciling and having a great relationship. And another thing that I would do differently is she made me promise not to have a funeral or a memorial or anything like that. And I just think it serves a purpose for other people.
It's for the living.
It's for the living. And so,
So you did it anyway.
Yes, I did it anyway by not doing it. No, I didn't do it. And I regret not doing that because it was tough. I mean, I bet
you had a lot of people calling you and saying, well, when's the service? Or, when can we pay our respects? Whatever. Yeah.
And no one knew actually. So they would be, for 4 months, I had her phone on and they would call and say, hey, where's Hazel? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. She's deceased. So it's, it was a tough battle, but I learned so much about caregiving that when I met you, I just said, people need to prepare themselves either to be a caregiver or to have someone care for them.
Okay, so you're recommending to others listening that if their loved one says, I don't want a funeral, just, let me fade away in the night. You're saying you wouldn't have done that now that you know what you know, right? And you wouldn't recommend that anyone does that? Is that what you're saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, I'm saying I think I would have done something to honor her, whether it's, write an obituary, a memorial or something like that. And, this book, the book that I wrote, it started off to be really dark, but I put it on the shelf and wrote this one in her honor, truly, to sort of say, she came from really horrible circumstances, did the best she could. It affected me, but out of all that, I think good can come. And so I did that instead of, have a big memorial service. So
tell us the name of the book again, because there's a very long subtitle, right?
Well, the subtitle was given to an agent who was repping my book, so I'm not married to it yet. It's in the process of being published right now. It's called Toxic Mothers.
So it's not out yet.
No, it'll be out. I'm hoping to launch it on Mother's Day.
Oh,
so
that's nice.
Yeah.
So tell us the title again, as it is right now.
Toxic Mothers: A Son's Guide to Healing and Moving On.
Okay.
And so, the other is Finding Virtue and Love and Integrity, one rule at a time. The book really helps men, especially, but people who read the book, to understand how they become toxic and how they respond to toxic input, and then how to undo it by looking at the rules for life that they create for themselves. And so, and that's why it's one rule at a time. As we become aware of these rules we live by, we can change them to be less toxic, and we can change them to love others who are toxic.
Is this your first book?
It is. Yeah. I've started a second one, but yes, this is the first one.
Where did you get the motivation and the expertise? I mean, is it easy to write a book? I mean, obviously I've written 4, so I know, but we're talking to people out there who really need to write a book,
I absolutely believe everybody has one book in them at least.
Sure.
And my whole life I have written and wanted to communicate. And so it was a real natural sort of outflow of what I did. But I really feel like I took the time to think I can present this information. I'm an educator. And I just,
be easy for you to
it's
write.
the way I think. Yeah. So I've written in many styles.
So how did you decide whether to self-publish, find a publisher, et cetera? And obviously you found a publisher. Who's the publisher?
No, I have not found a publisher.
Oh, still in the process.
Yes. I have several publishers that were interested, but I don't have a really big social media following. So they're kind of afraid to take that on. I'm going the self-publishing route. And it shouldn't be long because I have a team in place already to. Are you
working on your platform, your media presence?
I have a website called it's just www.guyarcuri, GUYARCURI.com, and on that it's a platform. If you opt into it, you can download this hilarious assessment whether or not you have a toxic mother, and all of the scenarios on there are personal and true, but it also compiles research into scenarios that help you understand what it means to be toxic. But I also do men's retreats. I do online support groups, whatever. It's a nice website. I write a blog, that kind of thing.
Now, typically, I've always counseled people that if they have a toxic family member, that they should avoid them and stay away from them. And so are there any occasions where if you had a toxic mother and she wasn't going to change, and the reason that you left was because she was toxic, and now she wants to come back into your life and she's still toxic, I mean, would you give different advice for a situation like that?
It's a really good question. I think for me, my advice is to try to heal as soon as possible. And also to really understand that when you're healing, it doesn't mean that you actually have to reconcile or be huggy poo with your mother. I don't think that is, part of healing is deciding whether or not that is an appropriate relationship. And sometimes it's not. But it doesn't mean you aren't healing, and it doesn't mean that you can't untangle from the sort of holds and toxicity that she has on you. Yeah. So.
I'm speaking from personal experience here. I have a family member who has been toxic, and many times this person would say that my words would hurt her, and her words would hurt me. And so we came to an agreement that she wouldn't communicate with me, and I wouldn't communicate with her. And that's our détente, our peace. Mm-hmm. Is there any hope for us?
Are you asking?
Yeah, I am.
So for me, or
for anyone else who's in a similar situation, who's tried a million times, to reconcile, but maybe this person in their mind is just irreconcilable. I mean, they even have, that's what divorce lawyers about, irreconcilable differences or whatever. And so it's not my wife, by the way.
No. So I think that it's important to in my book, I outline this process about identifying these things called rules to live by. And, when I think about you and this person in your family, you're each saying things that are hurting each other. And each of you has a sort of rule in mind about the way life ought to go for you. And it's okay to want things to go your way. It's not okay to insist that those things go your way inappropriately and demand it and put that demand on someone else. And so my book teaches how to identify those rules to live by that are coming at us and that are coming out of us. And so, and in there, I think there's more opportunity to reconcile when you realize that this person that you said, so a young lady, that, if you can recognize what her rule to live by is, then it takes the edge off of the, irreconcilable differences a bit. And, if she's just inappropriately insisting that you meet her in this way, your only recourse is to decide how you're going to internalize that demand. Are you going to make it a toxic response, or are you going to create your own virtue and response? So
thank you. I think I might get something out of your book. Again, how can someone get a hold of you, and how can they eventually get your book?
You can go to www.guyarcuri.com and opt in if you want. I also have Facebook at hashtag Guy Arcuri Path, PATH.
Great.
And
I can't believe how fast our time has gone today. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And again, a reminder, all our live shows become recorded podcasts and video casts on all our platforms that I mentioned earlier. And don't forget to check out our membership website, caregiverdave.com. It's a free membership support community with lots of tools, resources, free gifts, as well as my Facebook page with the same name, Caregiver Dave. And please click the like button below on whatever platform you're watching or listening on this. It helps us reach even more caregivers by improving Google's search engine. So again, to all my listeners out there all over the world, thank you so much for tuning in twice each and every Wednesday and making us the #1 caregiver podcast on the internet. Look for our podcast on your favorite platform or on caregiverdave.com. I have a book coming out soon. It's called Secrets from the Hammock, Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times. It's in pre-sale. So the more people I can get to reserve their copy, it'll all get dumped into the date, May 5th, the launch date. You'd be doing me a personal favor by helping me to get #1. Just go to Amazon.com and look up Secrets from the Hammock. Thank you so much. And it's a great book, too. You really enjoy it. And I'm planning on making an audio version with my own voice. So until next week, same time, same channel, may God richly bless you. Bye-bye.